Good evening. Tonight, I invite you into a mystery, a revelation that has the power to break through the walls that surround you, lift you from the pit you've been trapped in, and lead you to the place of your breakthrough. This message isn't just words, it's a key, and if you receive it, not with the ears of man, but with the Spirit, it will open the door to solve any problem in your life. There are two realities, the seen and the unseen. Most people dwell only in the seen. They fight with what they can touch, battle what they can understand, and suffer under the weight of the visible. But the answers, the solutions, the breakthroughs, they're not born in the realm of flesh. They're born in the realm of the Spirit. What if I told you that the problem you face is not the true problem? What if I told you that the issue isn't the debt, the sickness, the betrayal, the fear, the temptation, or even the enemy? The true problem is not that the storm is around you. The true problem is that the storm is getting inside you. Let me take you to the mountain where the prophet once stood. The earth shook. The fire blazed. The wind howled, but God was not in the earthquake. He was not in the fire. He was not in the storm. He was in the still, small voice. The voice that doesn't shout but whispers. The voice that doesn't force but invites. The voice that doesn't shake the earth but shakes your soul. That voice still speaks. And if you will silence the noise of fear and anger and anxiety, you will hear the answer that has been waiting for you all along. What is the mystery? It is this: every problem you face is an invitation. It is not your enemy, it is your doorway. The Red Sea was not the end of Israel, it was the passage to their deliverance. The fiery furnace was not the destruction of the righteous, it was the stage for the presence of the fourth man. The lion's den was not Daniel's death sentence, it was his promotion. And the cross, the place of suffering, the place of loss, the place where hope was crucified, that place became the altar of salvation, the turning point of all history. Every problem in your life can become that altar if you bring it to the one who resurrects what man has buried. You see, you've been looking at the wrong thing. You've been asking, how do I fix this? But the true question is, who do I bring this to? The problem doesn't get solved by human effort. It gets solved when it is surrendered. What you give to God becomes transformed. What you hold in your hand stays broken. But what you lay on his altar becomes a miracle. There's a mystery in the loaves and fish. A few pieces of bread, a few fish, not enough to feed even a small crowd. But placed into the hands of the Master, they become more than enough. They feed thousands. They overflow. They satisfy. They multiply. The difference wasn't in the bread. It was in whose hands the bread was in. Your problem may seem too great, but it's not about the size of your struggle. It's about the greatness of your God. And here's another mystery. The problem may be part of your calling. Joseph was thrown into a pit, sold as a slave, accused, imprisoned, and yet every step of his suffering was a step into his destiny. The very problem he faced became the path that led to the throne. What you see as the obstacle may be the road. What you fear as the curse may be the blessing in disguise. God does not waste pain. He redeems it. He transforms ashes into beauty, mourning into dancing, and valleys into highways of glory. But there's more. The ultimate answer to every problem is not found in fixing the outer world, but in being transformed on the inside. The problem isn't the darkness, the problem is the absence of light. The problem isn't fear, it's the absence of perfect love. The problem isn't confusion, it's the absence of truth. So the solution is not found in attacking the darkness, but in igniting the flame. The moment you stop looking at what's against you and start seeking the one who is for you, the moment you stop trying to control and start to worship, that is the moment the shift begins. You want to solve your problem. Don't chase the wind, chase the presence. Don't battle shadows, walk in the light. Don't seek the blessing, seek the blesser. And when you do, the mountains will move, the chains will break, the waters will part, and what once stood against you will bow to the one who stands with you. The answer has never been far from you. It's closer than your breath. It's waiting, and it's calling your name. So rise up, not in your strength, but in his. Stand not on your understanding, but on his promise. Move not in fear, but in faith, for the same power that raised Messiah from the grave lives in you. That power can overcome anything, every storm, every wall, every impossibility. You were never meant to carry the weight of the world. You were meant to release it into the hands of the one who holds the universe. This is your moment, not to escape the problem, but to rise above it. Not to avoid the fire, but to walk through it without being burned. Not to fight the battle, but to stand and see the salvation of the Lord. Every chain can break. Every burden can lift. Every fear can bow. But only when you turn your eyes from the problem to the one who holds the answer. For he is the key, he is the way, and in him there is no problem too great, no enemy too strong, and no situation without hope. Every problem you face is not an enemy, but an invitation from God, a divine doorway to your transformation and breakthrough. Every problem you face is not an enemy, but an invitation from God, a divine doorway to your transformation and breakthrough. This is a truth that contradicts how we've been trained to think. In the natural, we see problems as interruptions, as obstacles, as burdens. We see them as things to get rid of, run from, or fix as quickly as possible. But in the Spirit, the perspective is entirely different. In God's reality, the problems that press against you are often allowed, even orchestrated, to press you into His presence and propel you into your purpose. What you think is the battle may actually be the blessing wrapped in disguise. The very thing you're trying to escape could be the thing God is using to lead you into your calling. Look through the pages of Scripture and you'll find that some of the greatest breakthroughs were born not in comfort, but in crisis. Joseph's journey to the palace began in a pit. David's rise to the throne was marked by years of fleeing from Saul's spear. Esther's courage rose in the face of national extermination. The apostles were scattered by persecution, only to take the gospel to the ends of the earth. And Messiah himself, when he faced the agony of the cross, didn't avoid it, he embraced it. The cross, the greatest problem in the eyes of man, became the greatest victory in the eyes of God, because in the kingdom, problems aren't ends, they are beginnings. God doesn't view your life the way you do. He doesn't see your struggle as an interruption to his plan. He sees it as part of it. The Red Sea was not a trap for Israel, it was the setup for the miracle. Had there been no sea, there would have been no parting. Had Pharaoh not pursued, the people might have never seen God's hand move so mightily. The same is true for you. The walls you face, the doors that won't open, the people who betrayed you, the situations that seem too far gone, these are not roadblocks in your destiny. They may be the very fire that forges your testimony. God doesn't waste pain. He doesn't allow storms without purpose, and if he has allowed it, he will use it. But the key is in how you respond. When problems come, you have two options to see them as curses or as callings. The Israelites in the wilderness saw lack and feared death, but Caleb and Joshua saw the same land and saw promise. One group perished in fear, the other inherited the land. It was not the problem that determined the outcome, it was the perspective. What you call an attack, heaven may call an invitation. What you see as a threat, heaven may see as training. What you dread may be what God is using to make you who you were born to be. Sometimes the problem exists not to destroy you, but to expose what must change in you. Pressure reveals the cracks in the foundation. Trials reveal where your trust really lies. Problems shake the false securities and illusions of control. And in that shaking, God begins to rebuild something truer, purer, stronger. The pain becomes the pruning, the hardship becomes the holy ground, and the weakness becomes the window through which his power is made perfect. If every problem is an invitation, then how do you accept it? You don't do it by complaining, you don't do it by retreating, you do it by stepping into the moment with faith. You take your eyes off the size of the problem and place them on the size of your God. You lift your voice not in fear but in praise. You don't ask, why me? You ask, what are you teaching me? You stop trying to solve it in your own wisdom, and you bring it to the altar where it can be transformed by his hand. What you surrender becomes sacred, what you offer becomes multiplied, and what you give to God becomes the gateway to your breakthrough. So do not fear the problem, do not curse the struggle, see it for what it is, a door. A door into something greater, a door into deeper faith, a door into a new level of trust, of purpose, of power. For in the hands of God no problem is wasted, and what the enemy meant for evil he will use for good. This is the mystery of redemption, that nothing surrendered to God remains broken, and every problem, no matter how dark, can become the very place where light bursts forth. The true answer is not in fixing the outer circumstances, but in surrendering them completely to God, allowing Him to bring the miracle. The true answer is not in fixing the outer circumstances, but in surrendering them completely to God, allowing Him to bring the miracle. This truth cuts against the grain of human nature, which is always striving to control, to fix, to figure things out. From the moment we face difficulty, our instinct is to analyze, to strategize, to manipulate the situation until we feel safe again. But there is a mystery in the way God works. His ways are not ours. What seems wise to man is often foolishness in the kingdom. The more we try to control, the more entangled we become. The tighter we grip the situation, the more we strangle the life out of it. The breakthrough doesn't come by the strength of your hand, but by the release of it. The miracle begins where your striving ends. Throughout the scriptures, there is a pattern not of fixing, but of surrender. Abraham didn't receive the promise by planning, but by laying it all down. He placed Isaac, the very answer to years of prayer, on the altar. And it was only when the knife was raised in surrender that God intervened. He provided what Abraham could not. The solution didn't come through effort, but through yielding. The provision of the ram in the thicket wasn't a reward for Abraham's brilliance, it was a response to Abraham's surrender. And that's the pattern that still holds today. The things we hold most tightly often become the very things that hinder the move of God in our lives. But when we release them, He moves. The same was true for Moses. He wasn't called while leading an army or managing a campaign. He was called in the quiet, on the backside of the desert, barefoot before the fire of God. And when the time came to confront Pharaoh, Moses wasn't armed with weapons or strategies. He was armed with a staff, a simple stick surrendered into the hand of God. That staff, once a shepherd's tool, became the instrument of miracles, but only after Moses laid it down and picked it up at God's command. Again, not by fixing the outer, but by trusting the one who holds the power. You see, when you try to fix it on your own, you are limited by your strength, your knowledge, your resources. But when you surrender it to God, you're no longer limited. You invite the infinite into the finite. You give space for the supernatural to enter the natural. That's why surrender is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's not giving up, it's giving over. It's not quitting, it's transferring ownership. And when something passes from your hands into His, it takes on a different nature. What was broken can now be healed. What was empty can now be filled. What was impossible can now be accomplished. Yeshua stood before thousands in a deserted place. The people were hungry, the day was long, and there was no food in sight. But a boy brought his lunch, 5 loaves and 2 fish. Not enough to meet the need, but it wasn't about the quantity. It was about the surrender. When it passed into the master's hands, it multiplied. When he blessed it and broke it, it became a miracle. Not because the bread changed in itself, but because the source changed, and that's the key. The moment your problem moves from your control into God's authority, it enters the realm of the miraculous. But surrender is not a one-time act, it's a lifestyle. Every day you wake up and choose to place your burdens on the altar. You choose to say, not my will, but yours be done. You choose to release the need to understand, to explain, to force, to grasp. And in that release there is peace, there is clarity, there is a shift in the atmosphere. Because God doesn't need your perfection, He needs your permission. He waits for the moment you stop fixing and start trusting. That's when He moves, and sometimes the miracle isn't that the problem goes away. Sometimes the miracle is what happens inside of you. You find strength you didn't know you had. You find joy in the middle of sorrow. You find light in the middle of darkness. And even if the situation doesn't change, you do. That's the deeper miracle, not always in what happens around you, but in what happens within you. That's where the true victory begins. When you surrender what you cannot control and trust the one who already holds the end from the beginning, you position yourself for the power of heaven to be revealed. God's solutions are not found in the noise or chaos, but in the still, small voice, and you must quiet your spirit to hear it. God's solutions are not found in the noise or chaos, but in the still, small voice, and you must quiet your spirit to hear it. This is a truth that has been lost in a world of constant sound, movement, and distraction. Every moment of the day is filled with the chatter of the world, opinions shouted from every corner, anxiety swirling in the air, images flashing before your eyes, fears rising up from within and without. The noise is deafening, and in that noise the voice of God is not absent, but it is hidden. He does not speak to compete with the noise, he speaks beneath it. He doesn't shout to get your attention, he waits for you to draw near, to step away from the storm, and to seek him in the quiet. When the prophet Elijah fled to the wilderness, overwhelmed by fear and despair, he didn't find God in the dramatic signs. The mountain shook, the wind roared, the fire blazed, but the Lord was not in those things. Then came a gentle whisper, a still, small voice, and there, in the silence, the divine met him. It was not the force of the elements that carried the answer. It was the quiet presence that came after. That is the pattern of God. He hides his treasures in stillness. He speaks not to the frantic mind, but to the heart that is willing to wait. In the noise, your mind races. It looks for solutions, replays the past, imagines the worst, and obsesses over what cannot be controlled. But when you step into the quiet, something shifts. The flesh is silenced. The fear begins to loosen its grip. The urgency of the world fades, and in that sacred space, your spirit becomes sensitive to the whisper of heaven. Most people miss the voice of God not because he isn't speaking, but because they aren't still enough to listen. They are listening for thunder when God is speaking in a breath. There is power in silence, but it is not easy. Silence demands surrender. It means letting go of control, of needing to have the answer now. It means waiting without knowing, trusting without seeing. And yet, in that very surrender is where the voice becomes clear. When your soul is still, the word comes alive. When your thoughts are hushed, the Spirit begins to move. And in that place, direction is given, comfort is released, answers rise not from outside, but from within where he dwells. The enemy knows the power of noise. That's why he floods your life with it. Not just with sound, but with distractions, confusion, constant stimulation. He wants to keep your soul agitated, restless, unable to hear the one voice that can bring peace. But God doesn't shout over the enemy. He waits for you to turn down the volume of the world so you can hear the frequency of heaven. And when you hear it, everything changes. One word from God can silence 1,000 fears. One whisper can reveal what years of striving never could. One moment of divine stillness can bring clarity to what has felt impossible. When Yeshua was on the earth, he often withdrew from the crowds. He left the noise behind to be alone with the Father, not because he needed escape, but because he needed alignment. He knew that in the stillness he would hear the voice that mattered most. And if he, the Son of God, sought that quiet place, how much more must we? The secret to solving what troubles you is not always in action, but in alignment. And alignment comes when you are still enough to listen, when you clear the space of your soul and invite his voice to speak. The world will always be loud, the storms will rage, the chaos will try to consume you, but you have a choice. You can let the noise define you, or you can press through it to find the place where the whisper speaks. That whisper is waiting. It holds the wisdom you need, the peace you long for, the answer you've been seeking, but it is not found in panic. It is not found in rushing. It is not found in endless talking or planning. It is found in the quiet, the sacred quiet where heaven leans down and breathes into your spirit. And in that breath is the solution. In that whisper is the breakthrough. And in that stillness, you will find what every storm has tried to hide. Your struggle may actually be part of your calling. What seems like destruction could be the path to your destiny. ChatGPT said, "Your struggle may actually be part of your calling. What seems like destruction could be the path to your destiny." This is one of the deepest mysteries of God's ways. What appears to be a setback is often a setup. What you call a breakdown, heaven may call a breakthrough in disguise. The very fire you are trying to escape may be the fire that forges your purpose. The pain you are walking through may be the very ground where your anointing is being born. God does not work on the surface. He works through layers, through trials, through things that don't make sense in the moment. And often, when you feel farthest from your calling, you are being prepared for it. When Joseph was thrown into the pit by his brothers, it must have looked like the end. Betrayal, abandonment, slavery, none of it looked like the fulfillment of a dream. But every step that seemed like loss was secretly moving him closer to the palace. When he was imprisoned for doing what was right, falsely accused and forgotten, he was not being buried, he was being planted. And in the prison, he met the connection that would one day bring him before Pharaoh. The suffering was not an accident, it was a strategy. God was weaving together pieces Joseph could not see. What Joseph thought was punishment was actually positioning. His calling wasn't hindered by the pit it was launched from it. The same thread runs through the story of Moses. He was raised in Pharaoh's house, but his calling didn't begin until he was driven into the wilderness. There, stripped of identity, isolated and forgotten by men, he encountered the fire of God. And only then was he ready to return, not as a prince of Egypt, but as a deliverer of Israel. The detour was not a mistake. The desert was not a delay. It was the furnace where God prepared him to stand before kings. The struggle became the school of destiny. The calling was birthed in the place of brokenness. Even David, anointed to be king, spent years running, hiding in caves, hunted like an animal. He had the promise, but his life looked nothing like the throne. And yet, in those caves, something deeper was being formed, a heart after God. Worship came not from the palace, but from the wilderness. Psalms were born not in comfort, but in crisis. The struggle purified the calling. The pain shaped the man, and when the time was right, God lifted him up, not just as a king, but as a shepherd who had walked through the valley. What this reveals is that your struggle is not proof that God has abandoned you. It may be proof that He's preparing you. The fire doesn't destroy the gold, it purifies it. The crushing doesn't end the olive, it releases the oil. The breaking doesn't disqualify you, it often qualifies you, because the calling of God is not built on ease. It's built on surrender, on refining, on trust forged in the furnace. You cannot carry the weight of a heavenly assignment with an untested foundation. So God allows the shaking not to destroy, but to strengthen. He allows the pressure not to break you, but to awaken what is inside of you. Some of the greatest ministries are born out of pain. Some of the deepest wisdom comes from walking through the darkest nights. You may look at your struggle and wonder what good could come of it, but you don't see the full picture yet. What you call suffering today may be the testimony that sets others free tomorrow. What you walk through in tears may one day be the answer to someone else's prayer. God does not waste anything, not even your sorrow. When Messiah hung on the cross, the world saw defeat. The disciples saw an end. The enemy saw victory, but heaven saw redemption. What looked like destruction became salvation. The greatest struggle in history became the doorway for all who would believe. That is how God works. And if He could bring glory out of the cross, He can bring purpose out of your pain. So don't curse your struggle. Don't rush out of the wilderness before its work is done. Look deeper. Ask God what He is building in you through it. Trust that what feels like a burden may be a bridge. And remember that your calling is not destroyed by the struggle, it is often discovered in it. Victory doesn't come through your strength, but by turning your eyes from the problem to the presence and power of God. Victory doesn't come through your strength, but by turning your eyes from the problem to the presence and power of God. This is the foundational shift that unlocks everything. As long as you focus on the problem grows. It consumes your thoughts, it weighs down your heart, it saps your energy, and it magnifies your fear. The more you stare at the storm, the more it surrounds you. The more you fix your eyes on the waves, the more you begin to sink. But when your gaze shifts from the problem to the one who stands above it, everything begins to change. The storm may still rage, but it no longer controls you. The waves may still rise, but they no longer pull you under. Because victory was never meant to come from within you, it was always meant to come from above you. This is the mistake so many make. They believe if they just try harder, think longer, or fight better, they will overcome. But in doing so, they place the weight of the outcome on their own shoulders. They exhaust themselves striving, pushing, planning, worrying. But God never asked you to be the source of your victory. He called you to abide in Him, to lean not on your understanding, and to fix your eyes on the author and finisher of your faith. Victory is not something you achieve, it is something you receive when your focus is no longer on the battle, but on the commander of the armies of heaven. Look at Peter walking on the water. He defied the laws of nature not because of his strength, but because of where his eyes were fixed. As long as he kept his gaze on Yeshua, he did what was impossible. The moment he looked at the wind and the waves, fear entered and he began to sink. It wasn't the water that defeated him, it was the shift in focus. This is the lesson. The power wasn't in Peter's feet, it was in his focus, and the same is true for you. You can't walk above the circumstances if your eyes are chained to them. You rise when you look up. You overcome when you worship instead of worry. You walk in power when your eyes are filled not with the problem, but with the presence of the one who cannot be moved. In the days of Jehoshaphat, when the armies of Moab and Ammon came against Judah, the king didn't prepare for battle by sharpening swords. He called the people to seek the Lord, and when the moment came to face the enemy, they didn't send out soldiers, they sent out singers. Praising God before a single arrow was fired, lifting up worship before they saw the outcome, they declared victory not by sight, but by faith, and as the worship rose, God moved, the enemies turned on each other. The battle was won without a sword being lifted, because the battle was never theirs, it was the Lord's, and the power of their deliverance was found in their focus. Your situation may seem impossible. The odds may be stacked against you. The voices may be loud, the night may be long, and the answers may seem distant. But there is one thing within your control where you set your eyes. If you look down, you'll see the dust. If you look around, you'll see chaos. But if you look up, you'll see the glory. When you shift your gaze from the problem to his presence, you invite heaven into your situation. You allow peace to reign where panic once lived. You allow joy to rise where heaviness once ruled. You step out of striving and into surrender, and that's where the true power begins to flow. This is not denial of the problem, it's elevation above it. It's not pretending the battle doesn't exist, it's placing it in the hands of the one who has never lost a battle. Fixing your eyes on him is not a passive act, it's an act of war against fear. It's a declaration of trust. It's saying, this situation is too big for me, but not for you. It's the posture of the victorious, not those who fought harder, but those who trusted deeper. Because the greatest strength isn't found in the clenched fist, it's found in the lifted eyes. And when your eyes are lifted, your heart follows. Your thoughts begin to align with truth. Your spirit becomes anchored. The winds may still blow, but you are unmoved, because victory is not measured by the absence of the storm, but by the presence of peace within it. And that peace comes when your eyes are fixed on the one who walks above the storm, who holds the seas in his hands, and who calls you to walk not by sight, but by faith.